Gunrunner 6174 back here again. I'm on like video 3 right now. A lot of people have like a purpose to each one of their videos. I don't know that I'm going to have that. I think that I'm going to be ranting most of the time. But I do kind of have a big intent behind this entire video. I've got a couple recent acquisitions here. I've got a chileno mauser 1895, and I also have a Swedish mauser made in the Obendorf factory in 1899. And we're going to talk about both of these a little bit. They're both outstanding in their own rights. But my main focus is not necessarily going to be on the Swedish mauser, because this rifle, it has its own reputation. I mean, everybody, I don't want to say everybody, but if you're in the surplus firearms collecting, you certainly have heard at some point in time of the Swedish mauser and its reputation. I think most people would agree with that. The chileno mauser, not so much. So, how did I come about getting this rifle? Well, I was in a gun shop that I go to quite often, and this rifle, I don't know, I want to say it had been in there for at least 3 or 4 months. I want to say maybe as long as 6 months. I'd seen the rifle and walked past it without doing any more than just maybe looking down the board, just looking at it overall and not thinking much of it. But one of the lessons you'll learn as a surplus firearm collector is you never know. You don't know everything about every surplus rifle out there. I mean, there's thousands of rifles, and certainly ones you've never heard of, and this was one of them for me. So I was in the store looking at it, and I went in a couple times, and I just kind of took the cable lock off the rack one time, and I just pulled it out, and I worked the bolt, and I said, wow, this is a really nice rifle. I've never owned a Mauser before. A lot of the German Mausers are pretty expensive, and for most surplus shooter grade surplus collectors, not necessarily collectors for the opportunity to just put them in a gun cabinet and leave them there and show people, but people who actually shoot the rifles, not much interest in, I'd say, a $1,500 German Mauser. If you can find one that has a good bore on it or something like that, there you go, there's an opportunity. But those opportunities for K98s and Gewehr 98s they're few and far between these days. So I see this rifle, and I take a look at it. I realize it's a pretty nice gun. I pulled the bolt out of it, looked down the bore, and mirror. I mean, it's a brand new bore. I don't know what else to say about it. No pitting, the sharp grit. The rifle, it's hard to get you to believe that if you really look at this rifle, that it looks like it's never been shot. I call it a sleeper. If you know anything about cars, a sleeper is a car that looks like a rinky-dink, and you would never look twice at it and think much of it. But when you put it up against another car on the drag strip and it wins, you kind of wonder what the heck just happened. And that's kind of the situation with my chileno mauser. Now, I'll admittedly say that I have yet to shoot this rifle. All I've done is purchase it, bring it home, and spend about 3 hours cleaning it. But this rifle, I anticipate, is going to be a sleeper. I say that for a lot of reasons. One, it's only a year date manufacture from the 1899 Swedish Mauser I have here. And this rifle, with its great reputation, made in the Obendorf factory, and yet this rifle right beside of it, and I'm not a historian by any means, I'm still learning, I think we all are. You're going to hear me misspeak a lot. But this rifle here is made in the Lowe factory, which to my understanding ended up splitting up into 2 different factories where they made Mausers in Germany, and the Obendorf was one of them. I don't know what the other one is. Again, not a historian. I'm not going to say I'm not going to try to be. I'm always going to try and learn more, but don't hold me to anything that I say, I guess is the best way to put it. I'll do my best. So this rifle made and manufactured by essentially the same company, it really doesn't differ that much. I mean, we can talk about a couple of the main differences, and we'll kind of just lay them side by side. I'm not a videographer by any means, but we'll talk about the Chilean Mauser first. The sighting arrangement, a little bit different. This rear sight here flips up forward like this. This flips to the rear like this. Not a huge difference. I think the reasoning behind that is when you're shooting the rifle and you feel the recoil, I've noticed that some of these with sights that go in this direction have a tendency to flop around just a little bit more. Not a big issue with me at all. The barrel moving a little bit forward, so starting in the middle, not probably a good idea, but barrel band's a little bit different. The bayonet's going to be a little bit different. The barrel profile is nearly the same. If you look here at the end, it's kind of milled and tapered, and it's the same thing with the Swedish Mauser here at the end of the muzzle as well. One of the differences I'll talk about is the front sight post on this is flat and it stays the same width all the way to the top. The chileno Mauser, which I'm not going to say I prefer one over the other rifle-wise, but the front sight arrangement I prefer a little bit better. It kind of comes up from a fat base, triangles into a taper, and I don't know if you can see that, but I actually prefer that a little bit better. It makes for a more precise sighting arrangement for me. The cleaning rods are a little bit different. This is a full-length cleaning rod on the Swedish Mauser. And then I'm going to put this, since we're talking about this one, I'm going to put this a little bit more in camera sight. This is a half cleaning rod, kind of like the Gewehr 98s and the K98s. You attach your buddies to yours and you got a full-length cleaning rod. Probably saves a little bit of weight. Coming back here, a little bit of difference in the bolt setup. How are the bolts different? Well, we'll kind of fast forward to the K98 and the Gewehr 98. One of the big innovations with that rifle, well, there's a lot of innovations. The biggest one, I think, is the not locking lug, but the third safety lug in the rear, just in case the two forward locking lugs were to shear. This bolt would have something to keep from going rearward and hitting your face. I'm sure it's happened in the past. I doubt that it's very common. But either way, the chileno Mauser has an advantage and also has a disadvantage. We'll talk about the advantage first. So first, the one advantage that the chileno Mauser has, and I'll take the bolt out in hopes that you can see it, is in the rear of the receiver, there's actually a little tab here that's part of the receiver. What that's going to do is it's going to prevent, if that was to happen, if the two forward locking lugs were to shear, it would actually stop on this safety lug. Now, in the K98s and the Gewehr 98s, I guess they came to the conclusion that this wasn't sufficient enough for them. But it's better than having nothing at all, in my opinion. Now, the disadvantage of the chileno Mauser, well, I say this safety tab is an advantage for the chileno Mauser as opposed to the Swedish Mauser, is because if you look at the Swedish Mauser, it doesn't have that tab at all. Even though this rifle was manufactured after the chileno Mauser, this one does not have that at all. So, the disadvantage of the chileno Mauser, and one of the advantages of the Swedish Mauser, is that the Swedish Mauser, on the end of the bolt here, has a gas escape. That was one of the big designs of the K98, Gewehr 98, is that on the bottom of the bolt on those, they have two large ports here. I don't have one. Hopefully I have one in the future, I don't know. But on the bottom, there's two big gas ports here. That's in case a primer was to burst, case ruptured. All that gas pressure is going to send the round with less velocity down this end, but also put pressure on this end. And if that gas has nowhere to go, it could cause a rupture and the receiver blowing the receiver out. Well, the Swedish Mauser has a gas escape. How effective that would be probably depends on the severity of the case rupture. I've never done any testing. I'm sure there's some engineers out there that have, but advantage, Swedish Mauser, gas relief. Disadvantage, doesn't have the third safety tab here. Chileno Mauser, advantage, has a safety tab. Disadvantage, doesn't have the gas escape. All right. So, next thing about the Chileno Mauser is that these are stripper clip fed rifles, meaning you take 5 rounds on a stripper clip and you shove them down. Disadvantage to the Chileno Mauser is on the left side of the receiver. It's solid here. There's no finger depression that would allow your thumb to go down. You can work around it. It's not going to be a make or break for anybody, I would say. But if you look at the Swedish Mauser, it has a small thumb groove here that you can push your finger down a little bit better. So that's the receiver portion of the rifle. The next thing we'll talk about is the magazine follower. If you look on the Swedish Mauser, the magazine follower is flat on the back, which allows the bolt to lock to the rear, letting you know that you just fired your last cartridge and you need to reload. The Chileno Mauser, they went out of their way. For what reason, I do not know. Maybe for training purposes or something like that. The Chileno Mauser does not have that ramp, which allows you on an empty chamber to push the bolt forward because it's ramped to the rear. Now, one of the other differences with the Chileno Mauser, I'll try and get both of these in the picture for this one here, and the Chileno Mauser and the Swedish Mauser. The Swedish Mauser, Chileno Mauser have nearly the same safety lever, but to the rear, for the basically the cocking piece, if you will, the cocking indicator. On the Swedish Mauser, it actually has a little tang on the rear, which allows you, instead of dry firing the rifle on an empty chamber, what you can do is hold that and easily drop the firing pin, preserving your firing pin. My understanding, again, not a historian, I think at times people don't read things. Maybe they watch YouTube videos of other people, which honestly is where I get a lot of my information from. But again, don't quote me on anything because I haven't read a book on this. I'm only going off of what I've heard from other people. That they would put a leather tab in between the bolt, I guess, hood and the cocking piece, so that they could dry fire practice the rifle without putting undue stress on the firing pin. All right, now, if you look at the Chileno Mauser, you look to the rear and it doesn't have that at all. So the only option that you have is to press the firing or press the trigger and allow the cocking piece and the firing pin to go home. Now, what I do, and I don't know if it's a great idea, but just to kind of save it a little bit, I put a little down pressure, and that kind of eases the firing pin just a little bit forward, depending on how much oil is on there. Okay. So those are some of the big differences. There's a slight difference in the stock profile. I'm not going to go into explaining that. Reason being, you would literally have to sit here and feel it to actually know the feeling and the difference. But overall, it's a straight comb stock. Both of them are. They have nearly the exact same profile. One of the noticeable things you can see in the camera is that there is a finger groove, I'll call it, on the Swedish Mauser here. Now, I actually really, I don't kind of talked about collecting in a couple of the other videos. What type of collector are you? Are you somebody who wants a representation of that rifle, but you want something that you don't feel guilty about shooting? Or do you want a representation of that rifle in nearly pristine condition that you're kind of afraid to shoot because it's such a beautiful representation? Now, for me, I like the rough and rugged. I like the ugly rifles because for me, I like the history of them. I like the feeling of going out and shooting something and wondering where this rifle has been. And this rifle has been somewhere. You can see the bumps, the bruises, and all that kind of stuff. But a brand new unissued rifle doesn't necessarily, it has the history, it has the legacy, but that individual rifle in and of itself might not have that history. Now, would I snub my nose at an opportunity to buy an unissued chileno mauser? Certainly not. But this one to me is special. I mean, I'm shooting this video from a phone, so you're not going to be able to see the marks, the scrapes, and all that kind of stuff, but it's beautiful. I mean, this is, I believe, a maple stock rifle. And the Swedish mauser, I want to say, unless this was re-arsenaled, I'm not a wood ecologist, if that's a word. I'm not a carpenter. I can't look at a piece of wood and tell you exactly what type of wood it is. But this is, I don't believe this is beech. I want to say this is probably maple as well, and my understanding is that the German rifles were made with maple. So that's pretty cool too. I'm not taking anything away from the Swedish mauser. I love this rifle just as much. But the reason, again, that I'm shooting this video is because this chileno mauser, you will walk by. You go to a gun store, you're looking for a Swedish mauser, you'll look at this, it'll look kind of similar, it says Chilean, Mauser Chileno Modello, and you keep moving. But I will tell you that I have full confidence that this rifle here is every bit as good as the Swedish mauser. And I have full confidence that this will shoot as good, maybe even better, because the barrel wear is 0 on this rifle. It has a perfect bore. So if you're a surplus rifle guy, it's good to do research, it's good to read and all that. But when you see that rifle, don't just turn away. I mean, we got technology today. Pick up your phone and look it up. And learn some of the history right there in the shop, because you could be looking for a $450 Swedish mauser and walk right by a $250 chileno mauser and never make the comparison into the similarities of these two. Why do I think that is? I mean, Sweden is known for quality. In that time era, Sweden had the greatest steel in the world, is my understanding. And Mauser made the greatest rifles during that time period. Mauser made the greatest rifles during that time period in the same factory, Low Berlin. But I think the reason is because this says Chileno, and the average person would hear that and compare it to Sweden and maybe disassociate it with quality because it says Chileno. But what they don't realize is, again, they're made in the same factory. So I'm excited about this. I really like the character of this Chileno Mauser. I really love the Swedish Mauser. And to take a look at the comparison of cartridges, this is the 7mm right here. Beautiful. I put my own scars on my rifle now. And this is the 6.5 by 55. This is a 7 by 57mm Mauser. About the same length, but I really I smiled when I looked at the 6.5 by 55. If you're used to shooting a 30 caliber rifle, the casing is about that of a 30 caliber, a little bit shorter than the 30-06, but the bullet diameter will remind you more of a 5.56 with a little bit more length than it will a 30 caliber. And the 7mm seems like a very happy medium between the two. It's probably because it is. So again, haven't shot these. I plan on shooting them tomorrow. One of the things I've already done for the Swedish mauser is they battle sight zeroed. I'm not confident about the chileno mauser, but I know that they battle sight zeroed the Swedish mauser at 400 yards, I believe to be true. Not so great when you're shooting at 100. So you have to buy a front sight post. There's plenty of places to buy those. Liberty Tree is an awesome website that I recently discovered. I haven't purchased anything from them yet. I actually got this from Sarco in Pennsylvania. And so LibertyTree.com they have parts for rifles, anything. It's amazing what they have. It's like all the stuff that Germany had for the Swedish Mausers, all the extra parts, they put them in a box and sent them to Liberty Tree. It's definitely interesting. But I love these old guns. I mean, I love them. It's so cool. If you're thinking about getting into military surplus rifles and doing something like that, pull the trigger on it. Buy your first one. Start with a Mosin. I think most people do. But you'll find yourself addicted to it very quick, because I'm not a historian by any means. But most of my knowledge on history started with guns. I mean, I've learned more about World War I, World War II, just from studying the history of the firearms of that generation than I have sitting in a history class in high school. It's a cool thing. So next time you're in that gun store, that gun that's been sitting in the corner, maybe sitting in a barrel that you've walked by, has got a little bit of, this one was bad. It had a lot of surface rust on it, a little bit of pitting. Bring a bore snake with you. Clean the bore out real quick. Take a look down there. Try and see the rifle for what it could be and not for what it is sitting there in the bucket. Give it an opportunity, do some research, and maybe one day you'll grab a rifle out of that bucket and pay $100 for it, bring it home, and find out that $100 barrel rifle outshoots your $700 Remington 700. These rifles are cool, and they're made of a quality that very few people strive for these days. And you can get a lot of rifle for a very small amount of money with a lot of history, something you can hand to your children in the future. And I think that's a really special thing. So 1895 Chileno Mauser, what does that make this? 122 years old. And my younger friend here, 121-year-old, 117 years old, so 4 years difference. I'm not good at math, all right. Swedish Mauser. They're still out there, ladies and gentlemen. They're still out there. You can go to your gun shops. Most people aren't going to walk into a gun shop and look for one of these. They're going to walk right past them and go for that AR. And there's nothing wrong with that, to each his own. Everybody's got their own niche. But for me, I'm going to walk past the ARs and I'm going to go to the wood and the metal and see what that's all about. So 6174, like, share, subscribe, do all that fancy stuff we do on YouTube. But leave me a comment if you want. I really want to know how I can get better making videos, what you guys want to see. I really wish I would have done it before and after cleaning this Chilean Mauser and shown you guys. But doing a cleaning video, that takes forever. You got to fast forward. I'm not going to edit my videos. I really don't know how to do that. I don't have the equipment. My wife's a technology buff. Maybe she wants to get involved in this whole thing. But I don't have any intentions of doing anything other than grabbing the rifles, putting them on the table, and kind of expressing my feelings toward those rifles as those thoughts pop in my head, and just ramble a little bit. I don't have a checklist. But you know what I will do, if I do get the opportunity to go shoot these rifles tomorrow, maybe I'll show you some of the targets. I consider myself an above average marksman, so generally I can shoot to the performance of a rifle. Certainly certainly on a bench. So I could probably show you a group that would complement the capabilities of these rifles. I don't reload just yet, so if these cartridges don't perform in these rifles well, you'll see that, and I'll try maybe a different cartridge, different brand, but I think that these will be just fine. Now we've got some PPU here. I'll show you some targets, talk about my experience, and let you know how I feel about these, maybe in comparison to my K31 and how that shoots, and a little bit of an update. I'm still waiting on my M39 to pick that up from North Carolina, and we'll put that one on the street and see how that does. I've been doing again some research preparing to get that rifle because I have the stock, and I had to buy the crossbolt, which is what the recoil lug kind of impacts on inside of the lower portion of the stock to keep it from putting the undue stress on the bottom here. And then I realized that the fins, because they free floated the barrel, they shimmed the stock to get better accuracy out of it. They even, where the barrel bands were, kind of sanded some of that away, so when you tighten up the barrel bands, you're not putting pressure on the barrel. So I've looked. I can't find any shims. I don't want to take them out of the stock that it comes in for fear that maybe I want to shoot it in that stock too as well. So I need to figure out a way to make shims. So my plan is to get some maybe copper shim stock and try and figure out a way to cut it out so it'll work for me. But that's upcoming. So kind of debriefing you on how these two guys shoot, and again in the future getting my M39, and who knows what's next. So out for the second or third time, I guess. Gunrunner 6174. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you want to see.